All right, let's get started. So this is Power BI for true beginners. This is not for anybody that has already used Power BI a significant amount. So if you've created custom visuals, if you've already published Power BI reports, if you've drawn relationships between tables, if you've done custom measures, this probably is not advanced enough for you. This is truly for beginners. So in the spirit of that, we're going to start by downloading Power BI Desktop. So while we're waiting for that to get started, um, just a little bit of concept. There's kind of two schools of thought, just in general, around visualizations. Some like to start with, having a visual in mind, and then working towards I'll say working backwards from a visual to understanding the data and the organization of that data that you need in order to produce the visual. I think you can also if I can figure out how to do this, you can kind of do it this way too. So this is the method we're gonna take today. I have some data. I don't really know what visual I want to create with the data. I might have some ideas, but the simplest way to start is really with data. So I've created some dummy data here. It's really just a list of projects, the project status, the percent complete of each project, and the leader of each project. So really super simple data set. Instead of creating Excel charts, we're just going to try out this new Power BI thing. So some things to note, we've got our data stored in a table in Excel. That'll be helpful. And we only have one tab here. So again, pretty simple data set for a pretty simple video. Let me go ahead and close that because Power BI does not like to use open Excel files for a data set. All right, so let's see how our download's going. Oh, looks like it's done. Let's go ahead and open it. And for reference, the computer I'm working from, it's not super powerful, so it's a Microsoft Surface. I think it's a 9. It only has 16 gigabytes of RAM. It does not, I mean, it's a tablet effectively. So it's not super powerful. You can use Power BI on a lightweight machine like this. If you're going to do really heavy analytics, you're going to want a better machine, most notably with more RAM. All right, so we get that up on the correct screen. Here we go. So this is kind of when you open Power BI, this is the very beginning of it. We're going to go ahead and start by getting some data. The very first data source here is going to be an Excel workbook, which we're going to use. I'm going to grab that projects data workbook that we showed. And then what you'll see here is even if we didn't have the data in a table, we could actually reference an entire tab of a spreadsheet. Um, I don't know if it's best practice or not, but I don't like referencing kind of a raw spreadsheet without some structure to it. So it's probably worth some time putting your data into a little bit of structure, like a table. So here you can see I can easily just grab that table. All of the data that was in that Excel table is now accessible here. If we were doing some, fancy transformations, we could do that at this point. We're not because we just have one table. We're not going to do anything fancy here. This is just for beginners. But I mean, just like that, within a matter of a couple minutes, we downloaded Power BI Desktop and we got started by bringing data in from Excel. So what you'll see is the data that you bring in is going to show up here on the right-hand side under Fields, and it's going to automatically kind of bring in that data and then make some assumptions around the type of data that you have. So you'll see here, this is an indication that that percent complete is a field that it can summarize, or at least that it expects that it can summarize. But what it'll also probably try to do here in a little bit is put some shape around these columns from the table. So you can see that status, which was just, I think, scoping, in progress, complete for a couple, it's pretty smart. It knows that that's just text. The project name is just text. This percent complete, here you can see that it's saying that as a decimal number, which is good. And then the lead, which is the leader of the project, that was just somebody's name, so it's just seeing that as text. If you wanted to put a user's email address there, you could even go so far as to kind of tie that email address to the actual user within your organization. I've done that. It's pretty straightforward, but again, we're being simple here. So if we want to just kind of get our arms around the data that we have, there's a couple of ways to do that. We could create a visual, which again is kind of this landing page here. This is where we would put our visuals. This is our data. This is a way to kind of format those visuals. But also we have the data tab. So this is really just within Power BI, a way to see the data that we just loaded. Also, if we don't like the assumptions that it made on the data types, we could just make some quick adjustments here. Let's see what our options are for numbers. Okay, looks like I'm going to stick with decimal number. And yeah, the rest of these are text, and I'm fine with those being text. All right, so let's create our first visual. I like table. So let's go ahead and start with table. Again, it lets you kind of just start to work with your data within Power BI. So what I'm going to do here is I'm really just going to recreate what I had in the existing Excel workbook. Let me work on my zoom here. There we go. We can see that now. So again, we haven't done anything special here, but we are working in Power BI and we have our data that was again sourced in Excel. We can adjust this aggregation here because you can see that it just kind of did a sum, which is not very useful. But for example, if we want to see the average completion of all of our projects, I believe we go here. Yep. So in this formats tab within the visuals pane, you're going to go to totals. Here, you can put a custom label on the total. So let's go ahead and do that. And then for the calculation here, oh, you need to spell it correctly. There we go. Look at that little helpful spell check. So for the actual calculation to work correctly, I believe you'll need to go here. Yes. So this is the the data section of the visual, but within this, it's going to show the fields that you've already selected in that previous step. So you can see here, it's already telling us it's taking a sum of the percent complete field. So let's change that to an average. And now our number kind of corresponds with the label that we just put in place. Yeah, so if we don't like the fact that this is kind of showing these as if they're whole numbers or really decimals, while the average is 55%, we could, figure that out with math. Let's go ahead and put a custom label on this. So we'll use rename for this visual, and we'll just say percent complete. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and put a percentage sign complete. That way we have a more narrow column. And then we can actually adjust the formatting here back within that data tab. So we can kind of adjust this and then choose a percentage. Give it a second, let it work on it, and there you go. So now these are formatted as whole dollar percentages, or sorry, whole number percentages. And then, yeah, so back here, you've got a more kind of sensible view. Now, I'm really kind of rounding within my data. If I wanted to, I could take these decimals off, kind of in the same way. So just ratchet down the decimals here under the same format. So it's kind of similar to formatting in Excel, but obviously different because it's Power BI. So that's kind of an initial visual. One thing that I like about Power BI, especially the visuals, is that it makes some educated guesses on things. So let's, for example, say that we want to show the projects in this manner. Let's go ahead and zoom back out just so that's helpful. So this is probably not the best visual, but you can see at the very least on a relative basis, you can compare each project and its percentage complete to the rest. Yeah, but you can play around with all these different visuals. Power BI is very intuitive. It will try to make some educated guesses around the visuals that work well with your data. You can always kind of just unselect the fields that you've already brought in. And then once you go to the visual that kind of corresponds with how you would like to present the data, you can kind of bring those back in a way that's intuitive. I highly recommend referencing the help documentation. So Microsoft is always adding really helpful content for Power BI and other products. You can see that even right here, there's training videos that you can kind of jump out to YouTube to watch, and then there's guided learning, which I found very useful. So that's really all we're going to cover here because, again, we're trying to keep these short to about 5 minutes or less. This was, as we said, a true beginner's intro to Power BI. And yeah, that's all we've got for today. So thank you so much for joining us. Have a good rest of your day.